All right, one thing I wanted to talk about more in detail, our guys over at the podcast, Captain Dean, Captain Scott, Captain Caleb, really know their stuff. You know that by now if you subscribe to the podcast, obviously, like tens of thousands of other people have done. But let's go to one of the source. As far as I'm concerned, you guys know I like to throw that Bates reel. So we've got Chris Kane joining us now. Chris Kane from Bates Reels joining us now. And we're going to talk about a couple of things that are pretty darn important. Especially when you consider all the wind we've had. I mean, it's been 3 months, dang near, of wind, and it's about adjusting your brakes. And what I put on the top of the on the top of the topic here, as we're recording, Chris, is basically, you know, adjusting your brakes, adjusting your reel is not a one-time thing. And I think a lot of people fall into that habit. Like, okay, I got my cast down, good to go. That's not necessarily the case when in different environments, is it?
No, no, not always. And, that's subject to change, to greater or lesser degrees, depending on the angler and his casting capabilities, the amount of thumb play that he has on the spool during his cast, and then obviously even just from reel to reel. So on the manufacturing side, our tolerances and the way that we make our products, it's all extremely precise, and yet I've got two or three different hundos that may have a two or three click variance in the way that the brakes are
Mm-hmm.
adjusted and calibrated. And then, yeah, man, when you start throwing in environmental factors like the wind, depending on if it's a wind that's in your face or at your back or, even coming from the side,
Mm-hmm.
you should always be conscious of the fact that there are things that are playing against your ability to cast efficiently,
Mm-hmm.
and so what I would tell guys is like, look, you're probably, if you're facing a heavy wind, you're probably not going to have to adjust your brakes from one extreme of our dial to the other,
Mm-hmm.
but there's certainly going to be a 10 to 12 click window that should make you more efficient in whichever condition that you're facing.
Yeah, and just real quick for those who don't know or don't have a Bates, shame on you, first of all. But anyway, how you guys adjust, it's really relatively simple. And is there like a thumbnail sketch? You kind of just alluded to it there. A thumbnail sketch. If you're into wind, you probably need to try this. If it's a side wind, you probably need to try this. Is there any sort of parameters there?
Man, I mean, yeah, I guess generally speaking, there would be. So if you're throwing into a heavy wind, that wind is obviously it's gonna create um, surface tension against your lure or whatever it is that you're throwing, right? So if you're
Mm-hmm.
throwing into a wind, it's pressing that against you. That's going to tend to want to speed your spool up,
Mm-hmm.
and so to kind of counteract that, you want to increase or add braking power, magnetic power, which is really what we're talking about when we're talking about adjusting our brakes here.
Yeah.
So you're increasing the magnetic force against your spool to help counteract that free spool that your reel's wanting to go into when the wind's
Mm-hmm.
pushing
And you
against you.
and use that thumb.
Yeah, that's
That's
right. That's right.
use that.
I
That's another misconception. I'll let you finish, but a lot of times, you have these great reels, and people tend to almost get into this habit of, oh, I can just chunk it now. That's not necessarily the case.
That's right. Yeah, for sure. Now, like you certainly can on any number of reels, including some of ours. You can adjust the magnets to all the way down or all the way heavy or however you want to phrase that, such that you probably don't have to use your thumb a whole lot, but you're also the more magnetic uh, braking power or pressure that you're putting against the spool, the less
Yeah.
distance you're getting out of your cast, right? So,
Right.
um, if you're an old school bait casting guy that has kind of been in fishing since bait casters came around,
Hmm.
most of us are pretty used to using our thumb on the spools. There was just no way around it.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, thumb in the spool is still Especially if you want to be a really great caster, being able to efficiently pick apart different bodies of water and all kinds of scenarios. That's a really important part of it, is learning how to use your thumb on the spool when you're casting.
Well, let me show you something real quick.
What you got?
I showed this to the boys the other
Look at
day.
that, man. That's awesome.
That's my Pen 209. I could do curls with this thing and get a good workout. And I used to try to catch trout and redfish with that. So I keep it out here just as a moment. But that's what you're talking about. I mean, that's how you learn right there.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that was using your thumb when your thumb was the only thing that you could use.
That's exactly right. Good question here from Jay that is plugging in on the YouTube stream. Does casting overhead or over the shoulder make any difference from side arming and tuning when you're tuning your reel?
Oh man, that is a good question. Here's what I would say. I think if casting overhead gives you more or less leverage on your cast than casting sidearm, then it would affect your tuning, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
um, if I'm really trying to create some distance on my cast and I'm coming way back over my head and putting a lot of energy into it, that's a lot different than just kind of flicking my wrist from the side. And so, yeah, just be conscious of that. Anytime that you're creating more or less energy,
Yeah.
that's going to affect the way that the internal parts and braking system is affecting your cast.
All right, let's talk about the size of these reels. Now, obviously, Hundo has a low profile, generally speaking, but there are different sizes, different numbers that you can throw. How would you describe, what people should generally throw for the style of fishing that they have?
Sure. Yeah. So if we're talking about bass fishing, or if we're talking about in a lot of your audience's case, inshore fishing on the Texas coast specifically, then our 100 size reels are going to be a pretty good sweet spot for most people's efforts and what they're trying to accomplish. But we do have higher classes of reels, so 150 size frame, and then we're actually about to release a 250, so something that's even a little bit larger than that. And when those bigger reels really come into play is two things. It's going to be when you either need added drag pressure or capabilities, or if you need more line capacity. So those two factors are going to be the things that limit you the most with that 100 size reel. On the Salty Hundo, you're getting about 15 pounds of drag, which is pretty stout for that class of a reel. But you're really not getting a ton of line capacity. You're certainly getting plenty if you're catching trout and moderately sized redfish, which is most of what we have on the Texas coast. If you're getting into bull reds, like if you go around the coast of Louisiana, or if you're a Texas guy that really gets into catching jacks on conventional tackle, things that are going to pull hard for a long time and long ways, then our 150 size frames, or maybe even this new reel that we've got coming out, that's probably going to serve you better if that's what you're trying to do all the time. So more drag or more line capacity. That's when we really start encouraging guys to think about those larger reels.
All right, my ears perked up. John Parkoff's ears perked up here live. It's a good way. Now, you don't have to spill all the beans, but spill some beans. Spill some beans.
Yeah.
I know you're going to ICAST. Is that where the 250 is going to be released? Give us an idea of what you're talking about here.
Yeah, man. So ICAST is coming up here in just a couple weeks down in Orlando. That's the fishing industry's largest trade show. It's an internal show, and so yes, we will not be selling that reel at the show, but we will have it kind of on display for the world to see for the first time. And so yeah, man, we've got a 250 size reel coming out. It's not even in the same family as any of our other reels. It's a totally new design. Lots and lots of pulling power. It's a really smooth machine, and it's probably going to play really well in some of those kind of historically 300 and maybe even for some manufacturers the 400 reel categories. We really think this reel is going to play well in those kind of spaces.
I'm thinking kingfish when it gets hot in the middle of the summer. Have some fun with that.
Sure,
certainly jacks, but maybe even those kingfish out there. And our listeners are so good, our loyal audience here. James asked a question. that is exactly what was going to be next with you, and that is about gear ratios. He has an 811, however you want to put that. But I did want to talk about gear ratios. I think we touched on it last time you were with us, but it's worth revisiting, especially when you have, like you said, the 100, the 150, and soon the 250. What are people really looking for when they're looking at the gear ratios?
Man, I mean that what I've learned now that I'm actually in the industry is that so much of gear ratios has to do with personal preference and fishing styles. So I think what what I've kind of boiled it down to now, I could think back about growing up in the bass fishing space and how different gear ratios play into that space. But if you're new to bait casting reels, if you're new to these kind of concepts, here's how I break it down for you. Um, Gear ratios, the actual more important thing than the ratio itself is the amount of inches per crank that your reel is accumulating with each turn of the handle, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah.
And so depending on what kind of fishing you're doing, those extra few inches. Now we offer reels in 3 gear ratios: 6.3 to 1, 7.1 to 1, and then 8.1 to 1. And from the 6.3 to 1 to the 8.1 to 1, you're really only talking about a handful of inches
Hmm.
that separates that whole spectrum of reels.
Yeah.
And so, if you're a guy that is that's fishing top water stuff, like if you're throwing big plugs for
Hmm.
gator trout, or whatever it is that you're doing, we've learned that a lot of guys like that faster gear ratio, the 8 to 1. They really like being able to cover water, or they really like being able to get something out there, cover a strike zone or area, and
Hmm.
then get that lure back to them fast and get it back out on the water. That's really important for tournament fishermen, especially. Um, if you're a guy that is doing a lot more finesse fishing, and so maybe you're fishing potholes,
Hmm.
and so you're working potholes. You need to be able to work a 4 foot section of exposed substrate, and you want to be able to do that inch by inch. That's way
Yeah.
easier to do slowing down a slower gear ratio.
Hmm.
It's so if an 8 to 1 is moving your lure, whatever it is, 32 inches per crank. That's a lot of distance just by turning the reel one time, one revolution.
Hmm.
And then with a 6.3 to 1, you cut that down by 8, 10, or sometimes 12 inches, depending on the reel. That makes
Yeah.
a big difference when you're trying to fish tight spaces, or smaller surface areas for fish that are in place, or if you're sight fishing, that kind of stuff. So again, I guess just to summarize, the most important thing when you're thinking about gear ratios is seeing that number. How many inches of retrieve per crank that you get, and then
Hmm.
try and visualize that in your mind, and how it's going to apply to the ways that you like to fish, and
Yeah.
then kind of go from there. The 7:1 to 1 is I mean, it really is a great all around gear ratio. You can
Hmm.
speed it up if you need to, you can slow it down if you need to, but we have those other options as bookends on either side for folks that really do have a preference there.
Yeah, so the 7:1 to 1 I like because of what you just said. It's kind of a bass fishing sort of correlation. If I'm throwing into some thick grass or a ridge for looking for redfish, I want to get it out of there.
Yeah.
If I hook one, I want to get it out of there. So that's where that really comes in handy. It's kind of versatile as well with with other things. And we're actually you're very popular. We actually have, I didn't even advertise this one. It just posted on my YouTube channel. You're getting a lot of people asking questions. And James asked a question here that is how I want to wrap it up with you here.
Okay.
Um, and that is what you can share more detail about what's coming down the pike. You mentioned the 250, some of the things you're going to do at ICAST. A lot of people are wondering about spinning reels.
Yeah, man. So the spinning reel is super super close. We're literally just finalizing like color scheme kind of things right now,
Hmm.
and so those we'll have a couple of those at ICAST as well. Realistically, Those should be available to order and purchase in the fall sometime.
Yeah.
So we're almost there. We really do appreciate everybody's patience there. That has been a longer process than we anticipated, but we're just trying
Yeah.
to make sure we get it all perfect and right before we hit the market. In addition to the spinning reel and the 250 that we already mentioned, we have uh, we have some additions coming to lineups that you're already familiar with. So the Hundo lineup of reels, we're going to take that same the ergonomics of that frame, and we're going to beef it up a little bit and give you basically the Hundo in a 150 version.
Okay.
And then also the OG for people that like the original Gangster, that little black round reel that we've got.
Hmm.
We're working on that in a larger frame size as well, and then in addition to that, we've got all kinds of sort of new, kind of unconventional things for a real manufacturer that we got coming down the pipe. But those are the things to look forward to first.
I'm literally raising an eyebrow at that last comment, but I won't pursue that. That's Chris Kane, obviously a big friend of the Bite Me podcast, and looking forward to doing this again. There's so many topics that we didn't even get to, but I didn't want to take all your time. I know you're packing, you're getting stuff ready for ICAST. Appreciate your time, and we'll get back to the podcast now.
All right, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, we're